Hello and welcome to this video. So right now we're going to tackle the Google OAuth flow that we've been talking about, and this is slightly tricky because like the Google site in which you need to register your application and whatnot is slightly confusing in my experience, but we'll go through that together and we'll learn how it's done. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to open this URL that is called console.developers.google.com. So once you open that page, you'll see something like this. Perhaps your page is slightly different because by default I already have this OAuth project selected. So what we want to do is to click over here, and then we want to click this plus button over here to create a new project. And over here we want to simply give it some name. So I'm going to name that API out with node. Okay, like this one over here, and then well, not like that one, but like this one, and then I'll simply click create over here. So now we need to wait a few seconds. Okay, it's done, and we need to be sure that that project is actually selected. As you can see by this notification over here, it's currently being created for us, and now it seems that it's done. So I'm going to click this and then select that new project. Okay, so now over here, this is in my opinion the confusing part, because like you might be tempted to like search for OAuth, but you won't find anything. You see 0 results, but what we actually are interested in is this social API section and then this Google Plus API. So you need to click over here on this one, and then once this all loads up, okay, you'll see this, and now you see here that you can actually access user data with OAuth version 2.0, and this is what we want. So this is definitely what we want, and what we need to do is to click this enable button over here. Okay, so now on this page we get this notification that says to use this API you may need credentials. Click create credentials to get started, and we have this button on the right over here, and we're going to click that one. So now we need to actually create some credentials, and over here we already have this Google Plus API selected for us, but we need to fill in this part over here that asks us where will you be calling this API from. Now I'm going to select this first one, web browser JavaScript, because I think that is like the most generic one of these two, because we're going to talk with the Google both from like the React and from the node, but if we need to later on come back to this page and change something, we definitely will. So for now let's simply select the first one over here, and then over here what data will you be accessing? We want to select this user data, access data belonging to a Google user with their permission. That's definitely what we want. And next we click this what credentials do I need button over here. Okay, so on this page over here, this is a page that we'll be seeing quite a bit because we'll later need to come back here and actually edit these URIs over here. So for now, let's simply point them to our http://localhost:3000, since that is the address that our server is listening at. And then I'll simply copy this and paste it over here as well. But like I said, this won't work for a while. We'll need to come back here and modify these two values. So now we can click this create client ID, and we need to give our product a name over here that will be shown to users on that consent screen. So let us simply put something like API out with node, and then I click continue. Okay, great, so it looks like everything is completed. Now if I actually click back on this credentials button over here, now we see this, that we have this web client over here, and if I actually click on it, you can see that we have access, like we have easy access to like all of our credentials at once. So this won't be really useful to us right now, but will be useful to us in a moment. So just remember this page, and we'll need to reference it back in a little bit. Now the main problem right now is that we don't have a front-end project yet. So in the end, our React will be responsible for exchanging the user profile that is registered at Google for access token, and then React is going to send that access token to our backend server, and then our backend server will actually use that access token that just arrived and will exchange it for the user's profile in, say, like a JSON object that you can then like plug whatever property you want. So right now we want to kind of fake that first part of the puzzle. We want to somehow get access to access token without us having a React project or front-end project for that matter. And how can we do that? Well, there is one website that is called Google OAuth Playground, and that's exactly what we'll use for now to actually exchange like our current Google profile over here with access token. So to do that, we need to navigate to this page that I told you about, and you can simply make a Google query for it and simply type like Google OAuth Playground like this, and it should be like the first link, of course. Now we need to open that site. What we want to do now is we need to find Google OAuth 2 API version 2. So you select this over here, okay, and then you can select like we want to get access to user info profile, and it says in that pop-up, helper, view your basic profile info. So okay, we want that. That is like the scope that we want our users to grant us. So now we click this authorize APIs. Okay, so this is like the screen in which we need to choose account, and I'm going to choose mine over here. So once that happens, now we have granted the user profile permissions to this Playground application. Okay, now we have it, and now we have this authorization code, and we can exchange the authorization code for tokens. So as soon as I click this, we have here access to our access token. Okay, if we click here, okay, so now this is our access token. So in the end, this is something that actually React.js or any front-end framework in this playlist will actually get us. So now we have access to this access token, and what we want to do next is now we want to jump into the code and actually program the part of our backend which will expect this access token, and then it will use that to actually get access to entire user profile, and then we can do all sorts of stuff with it. So now we'll jump into the code and we'll program everything up, and then we'll come back to this page, refresh this access token, and then we're going to use a Postman and simply pretend that we are that front-end project and see how it all works. Okay, so let's get started. So what we need to do first of all is we want to install a new strategy for Passport that will handle that parsing the access token and actually exchanging that for the user profile. So over here in Passport we'll need to do some work, but before we actually do that we need to install that module. So I'm going to open this commander, I'm going to quit this server, and then I'm going to type yarn add, and the module that we want to install is called Passport dash Google dash plus dash token, like this. And that is a module that will allow us to do that. So right now, while this is installing, we can actually do some work over here. So we need to actually get access, get a handle to that module. So I'm going to make a new variable, and I'm going to call it Google plus token strategy, and then we're going to require that Google plus token, Passport dash Google plus token, like this, and now we can actually use it. So over here, similarly how we defined these two strategies so far, we're going to define a third one. So I'll come over here, I'll make a comment, I'll say that this is a Google OAuth strategy. Okay, so what we need to do is to again use the passport, so passport.use, and then we want to create a new instance of this strategy. So I'm going to type new Google plus token strategy. Okay, then I'm going to open this, and then I'm going to pass in object and a function as well. So it's really similar to how we've handled things in the past. And this time this async function will actually have here access token that we send to that. Next, refresh token, which is optional, and then we will have our profile. So this is the most important thing to us, and then we'll have that function done. Okay, so this is a fat arrow function, and we can close it all together. Okay, so over here we need to actually specify the Google client ID and the Google client secret that we received when we registered our application under Google. So we need to type something like client ID, and then we need to put something over here and client secret over here. So now I'm going to go to this site once again and simply copy this client ID that we have and paste it over here, and do the same for this client secret. Okay, so now that we have that, we can actually start doing some work over here. So for now, let us simply console log the contents of these three variables over here, so we can see what's in them. So I'm going to say console.log access token and then simply access token, and I'm going to do the same for refresh token and profile. Refresh token, and for the profile as well. Okay, so now we want to simply somehow use it as soon as possible, and then use this access token that we received over here using Postman and see whether we can get access to that profile that we're really interested about. And that's going to happen in our routes file. But before we do that, let's simply assign a name to this strategy so that I can show you how that's done. So let us simply call this strategy a Google token. Like this. So now whenever we use a passport.authenticate function and we pass it this name, Passport will know that we're talking about this strategy and not, for example, this one or this one over here. So now that we have this done, let us go in this user.js file over here and let us create a new endpoint over here. So we'll say something like router.route, and then we want to have endpoint something like OAuth and then Google. And then we want to post to that endpoint, and what we want to do is to actually use the passport.authenticate, so similarly how we've done it previously, and we want to pass in that strategy name, which is Google token, like this, and then similarly we want to again specify that session is false. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Let us see what happens if we just do this. Okay, so now I'll open a Postman. Okay, so I've just got Postman over here. Let us also restart this server and see if we get any errors. So I'm going to type yarn start dev and see what happens. Okay, seems like everything is good to go. So now I'll open this Postman. I want to use this endpoint, so localhost 3000/user/OAuth and /Google, and we want to post to that endpoint. So now if I post nothing, we should see that we are unauthorized. But now if I come to this body section over here and I send something as JSON, and what we want to send is that access token, and that access token should be specified as access token underscore token. Sorry, access underscore token, and then we can paste it over here. So now if I copy this access token over here and I simply paste that, let's see what happens. Okay, so we don't get anything over here, which is fine. We kinda blocked that request, but more importantly, you can see here that we have first of all our access token. Refresh token is undefined, which is okay, that is an optional token, but most important of all, we have access to this profile, and as you can see we have plethora of information over here. So we have my first name, my last name. We don't have any emails right now because if you remember over here, when we selected what we wanted from our user, we selected profile, we didn't select email. But if we select that as well, and I simply get a new access token, so remember this is what we get currently, and emails array is empty. So now if I do this once again, okay, and I exchange authorization code for tokens, and I copy the newest access token over here into Postman, I can cancel this request, and I click send again, and I scroll way down to the bottom. You can see that this time the emails array section is actually filled, and you see here my email. So that is how we'll gain access to user's email address. So that's great. We now have access to user's profile in this section over here. So now over here we can do the things that we spoke about in those diagrams. So we can check whether this user exists in our database. In case it doesn't, we can simply create a new user in our database and things like that. So let's get started with doing that. However, before we can actually do that, we need to make some changes to our user model, because right now this is really only made for local authentication accounts. So we only have like email and password fields over here, but we need to totally like enhance this model so that we can have like either the local authentication, the Google or the Facebook. So let's get started with that. So first of all, we want to have a field or property that is called like a method, which will tell us what type of method user used to actually make this account. So the method could be of a type string, but the string could be like either local, Google or Facebook. So to do that, we're going to specify a new field, method, that's the name. And then what we want to make sure is that it is of a type string. Next, we want to only allow it to be of certain keywords, so it can only be like local or Google or Facebook. So that's it for now. If you were to add like another authentication method, you'll simply like add a new name in this array over here. Next, we want to say that it is actually required. We always want to know like what authentication method user used for actually creating such an account. And then what we want to do is we want to have like 3 sub-objects. So one is going to be called local, and this object will be filled with data in case user actually used local authentication to create his or her account. Then we'll have a sub-object called Google, which you can, I'm sure, guess it. So Google will only be filled if the method is actually Google and user actually used this Google authentication. And finally, we have a third sub-object that is going to be like Facebook in case user used Facebook. Over here in our local, what we want is pretty much like before. We want to have email and password. So I'm going to simply cut this and paste it over here. But this time we can't say that this is actually required, because in case user makes an account using Google, then this obviously won't be filled, and then that's going to be a problem for us. So we are going to say that it is not required this time, and it is not unique. Okay, and for the password, again, it's not required. So we are done with the local, and now we can move on to this Google sub-object. So Google sub-object in this simple example is going to contain just 2 fields. One is going to be the ID, but remember, this ID isn't this user's ID, because Mongo database will actually assign a unique ID to every user document, but this ID is the ID that this user has at the Google service. So if I scroll above, you can see this ID property. So that is what we're going to store in this ID over here. So we'll have like, in case user made an account using Google, we'll have 2 IDs. One ID is going to be the ID that user is registered at Google, and another ID, like the main ID, is going to be like just for our database. So this Google ID is going to be of a type string, and that's pretty much it. And then we also want to get a handle on user email from Google, and we're going to store it inside of here. So we'll say that the type is string, and we want to make sure that lowercase is true, so we can easily compare emails. And we can actually copy and paste this for the Facebook as well. So later on, once we start working on the Facebook, we'll already have this prepared for it. Now, while we are in this user model file, we also need to make a couple of changes. So we have this pre method over here that was really useful to us like until now. So what it did is, before user document actually got saved, it automatically hashed password for us. But right now, if we don't change this and user tries to create an account using Google, we'll actually get an error, because you see here we don't have a password field, and this function over here expects password field to be there, so this definitely wouldn't work. So instead, what we can do is, in the beginning, we can simply check if the method that user actually authenticated with isn't local, and if that is true, then what we want is to simply not do any of this. So only if the method is local will we actually avoid this piece of code, and all of this will get executed as it did before. But now there is another problem over here, if you can spot it. Before, we had this password be like a global property, like a global level property, like it wasn't nested, it was over here, for example. But right now this password is actually nested in our local sub-object, and only then we have it over here. So the way that we're getting access to this password over here wouldn't work right now, so we need to actually change this to not only be this.password, but this.local.password, like this. And now this should work. And the same change we need to make in this isValidPassword helper function. So you see here again, we reference that password with just typing this.password, but now this password is nested inside of our local sub-object, so we also need to make that change. So I think that is like all the changes that we need to make in this file. So now we can come back here to this passport.js file and do some more work over here. So over here, what we need to do is we need to check whether this current user exists in our database, pretty much. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, we can create a new variable, let's call it existing user, and then we can simply await user.find1, and then we're searching our entire collection of users for this Google's ID over here. And remember, this Google's ID, we can access it if we access the profile, and then we simply add .id. So we want to check whether in our collection of users there is such user that has the exact same ID. So in our user document, take a look at the Google property, and then take a look at its ID, and compare that with profile.id, like this. And that is how we'll be able to get an access to existing user in case it exists. And if that's actually the case, what we want to do is, if that's the case, we simply want to return back I'm done with no errors and with that existing user. However, if that's not the case, if new account, for example, and let me bring this up on the top. So if we have a new account this time, we want to actually create a new document in our collection. So we can create a new variable, let's call it new user or something similar, and then we want to use that user model reference and simply specify all the parameters that our new user should contain. So over here we want to specify that a method this time is going to be Google. Next, in that Google sub-object, we want to specify that ID is actually profile.id, and that email is actually, let us check how can we get access to it. So if I scroll way down over here, you see that we have email property on this profile object, and that email property is of a type array, and then this array right now has only one entry, and this one entry is actually an object, and then this object has a property called value, and then that's the value that we want to save. So I'm going to attach this on top so we can see that as we type. So what we want to do is, okay, we want to reference the profile, then we want to reference the emails array, then we want to fetch the first entry in that array, and then we want to get access to its value. So something like this. Okay, so now we have that new user, and what we need to do is to simply save that. So I'm going to say await new user.save, and then I'm just going to call this done with no errors, but I want to definitely pass this new user in. Okay, and now looking at this, we also need that try catch block, so I'm going to come up above and say try, and then catch error. Okay, and then I'll cut all of this code over here. Okay, I'll indent this. Okay, and if there were any errors, we want to simply call done, and we want to pass those errors in. We want to send false for the user object, and for the actual message we can actually extract the message from those errors like this. So now this should work perfectly, and we'll test this pretty soon. So what we need to do is we need to also open a RoboMongo, and let us take a look at what we currently have in our database. Okay, so it seems that I have some leftover users, so I'm going to simply get rid of them. Okay, so now our collection of users is empty. So now let us actually, okay, I don't need to restart that, but let us actually try this once again. And like hopefully upon all of that running, we won't have that existing user, fine, so we'll create a new one. So hopefully we'll have a new user document over here once all of that is done. So let me simply check whether this is still valid, and it looks like it is. So I'm going to open this Postman application, and I'll just send this once again and see what happens. Okay, let us check this user documents, and we have this new user, and we have this user. We see that the method is Google. We see that this object of Google contains these two values, so we have its ID and email. And now what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to make a couple of console log statements. So I'll say here user already exists in our database. Okay, and then I'm going to copy that, and if that's not the case, I'll simply say user doesn't exist, we are creating a new one. Okay, and then I'll just escape all those. Okay, now I want to pretty much delete this user, and I want to show you like the entire flow of what's going on. So right now we don't have any users, so as soon as I click send, this will be like the first time our backend actually sees this access token, and we should see a message that this user doesn't exist, we're creating a new one. So let's see if that's the case. So I click send, and we see here user doesn't exist, we're creating a new one. Great. And if I refresh this, we see that new user. But now if I send this once again, we'll see that user already exists in our database, so we're not creating a new one. And if I refresh these collections, you see that we just have that one. So I hope that this now is much clearer once you like can see it running, and that's exactly what we wanted to happen. Now what we need to happen is, you see over here how we are not responding. Actually we are responding with the error that we cannot post to this URL, but what we want to actually happen is we want to respond with a JWT token that then the client can store and use it in future requests. So let's see how we can enable that. Okay, so let me hide this window for a moment. So what's going on currently is, if we open this routes file, as you can see we're passing this request to this passport authenticate function, but then we're not doing anything with it. We're not like letting it proceed to some user controller function. And that's what we need to do. So we need to create a new function in our user controller, and that function should be responsible for turning the user object in JWT string. And that's actually what we've done previously. So this is going to be really easy. If you take a look, for example, on this function over here, that is exactly what we want to happen. So we receive the user in this request.user object, and then we simply sign a token. So let's create a new function over here, and let's call it Google OAuth. Yeah, that sounds about right. So Google OAuth, and then it's going to be async, of course, request response next. Okay, and then what we want to happen is we want to pretty much like generate token like this. So we're going to say that token is actually sign token, and again we have that user in request.user, and just for good measure I'll actually console.log it so you can see what's in there. But anyhow, once we get access to that token, we simply want to respond with a status of 200 back to our client and simply include that token in that response. And we miss a comma over here. Okay, so that sounds right. Now I'm just going to copy this name and I'll navigate to this routes file, and then once this is over, yes, we want to simply call users controller dot Google OAuth, and I'm also going to extract this into new variable over here, and I'll name it passport Google. Okay, so we stay in sync of how we've handled things before, and I'll simply then like use it. Okay, and now let's actually test this. So yeah, let's test that and see where we are. So I'm simply going to use Postman and I'm going to click send, and as you can see we now have this token. And if I check the commander for any console.logs, you can see that request.user that we console.log in over here, you can see that what we have is the ID that Mongo database assigned to this particular document. We have a method, and we have this Google sub-object which contains all of these things. So that is great, and that is definitely what we want. And also, like, if we actually remove this document and see whether we're getting JWT even in the scenario in which we're creating a new account, yes, we indeed are getting it. So now this is all nice, but there is one issue, and the issue is in the way we are handling some of the things before. For example, this one, because as you can see previously for the signing up, we want to check whether there is a user with the same email, and we simply checked like this. So we want to test whether the property email has the same email. But if you remember, we definitely changed that, and that email property is right now inside of this local sub-object. So what we need to do here is to actually change that. So we want to actually go into local.email. But one important note, and this is a great example to explain it, as soon as you want to use, say, find1 function, so Mongoose's find1 function, and you want to check some nested property against something, you need to enclose them in quotes. Otherwise it won't work. So now this looks fine, and then over here, once we're creating a new account, you see this won't work, because if I was to not use ES6, it will look something like this. And this is definitely not the model that we have right now, because take a look at this, you see how it's different. So we need to make a couple of changes over here. First of all, we need to specify that a method is actually local, otherwise we wouldn't know. And then we want to actually fill that local sub-object with those values. Like this. Okay, so now this looks fine. Okay, nothing to change over here. Let's now test everything and I mean it will be easier for me that way to see if I missed something. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of any user's document, and I want to actually try to create a new account using the local authentication just to see if something is messed up. So I'll open a Postman, and I also need to refresh my memory on this endpoint, so I want this one, sign up. So I'm going to open the Postman, I'm going to type over here http localhost user sign up, okay. This is a post request, and this needs to contain a JSON with email and password if I'm not mistaken. So I'll say codeworker@gmail.com, and I'll say password is super secret password. And let's see if this will work. I'll also open a console over here, and let's see what happens. Okay, great, so it seems like it's working. So we're able to, so as soon as we create a new account using local authentication, we get JWT, okay? Now let us test the sign in endpoint. So I'll open localhost sign in, and that is again a post request, and this time I need to again include the email codeworker@gmail.com and password of super secret password, and let's see if this works again. Okay, this doesn't work. Sign in is a post, same schema, and for some reason it's not working. Let's see if we got any errors over here. Okay, we're not getting any errors, and let us check what code is responsible for this. So password sign in is this, and then if we take a look quickly at the local, okay, so yeah, okay, so this is a problem over here. So again, we're finding the user by the email, but again, things are quite different right now if you take a look at this. So we need to change it over here. So we want to look into local.email and validate that against email. And for the valid password, I think it should be working because we changed it over here. So let me now try the same thing again, and let us see if we get still this unauthorized that we definitely don't want to get. Yes, we're getting it again. So now I'm going to console log email over here, and I'm going to console log is match over here. By the way, I could have totally done this in the background and not record it, but I think it's nice that you can see how problems definitely arise and how you can take care of them. So I'm now simply console logging that. I want to see what's going on. Okay, so is match false. Okay, something is wrong with the password, and let me actually check whether the super secret password, okay, now something is wrong in this function over here. So we are comparing a new password with this.local.password. Let me also console.log this.local.password, and I want to also console.log new password. And I want to see what's in there. Okay, so I'll now do this once again. Okay, so this.local.password is super secret password, and the new password is this one. Now this is really wrong because this.local.password should be hashed version of this password, and I can actually check it over here, and yeah, it's really wrong. So we are not hashing it correctly. And why is that? So this should work, and we did specify that. The method is a local, so this.method should work. Let me check whether this gets called. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll actually remove this user, and then I'm going to create a new user once again. Okay, and I'll see whether that piece got called, and indeed it got called. But if I check this user, it still didn't get its password hashed. Okay, something is wrong over here. Oh, I see. So you see how we got the correct password hash over here, but we saved it as this.password and not this.local.password. So small things like that can really like waste your time. And like I said, like I could totally like not record this, but I think it's fun and interesting to see like how like one word can totally like mess everything up. So right now I'm pretty confident that this will work, so I'm going to remove all of these console log statements that helped us in finding this issue. So I am going to remove this user object document, sorry, and I'm going to make a new account again. Okay, and if I check it over here, we see that the password is hashed right now. So now if I want to sign in, this works and we get a token. Great. And if I want to create a new account using Google, okay, yes, great. I was hoping actually for this error. You see how we get it duplicate key error collection email. So now the database sees that the email codeworker@gmail.com is already in use by this local account, so we can't create this Google OAuth account, and we did change it over here. Okay, so we totally like got rid of the unique true property, but what's going on is that we have this index over here that we need to actually remove. So you need, if you're using RoboMongo, you simply want to expand your collection and you have indexes, and then you want to get this email _1 or underscore whatever and simply drop index. Now I think this will work. And yes, it's working. So now you've seen like in all these three scenarios we got JWT token. Okay guys, so this is really exciting because we're really near the end. Let me show you that diagram and let me show you the things that we want to do in this video, and like let's talk where we are currently. Okay, so hopefully you remember this diagram, and these four things over here are ones that we want to do in this video. So right now we are getting JWT token for all these four cases. Now we just need to check whether we can actually use JWT token and get access to some protected resources. So let's do that, and if it works then we are done with this video. Okay, so if I navigate to these controllers, to this user's controller, we see all of these methods over here, or functions, sorry, and we have this secret function that is actually a protected resource, and the only way that you can access this data over here is if you're actually let me find it over here. Yes, using this passport JWT, and that passport JWT expects a valid JWT token. So now what we can do is we have three different JWT tokens, and we want to simply check whether we can access that secret endpoint using all three of them. So I'm going to go to that endpoint, so localhost user secret, and I want to use a headers, and I want to say authorization, and then I want to copy and paste this JWT token. So this token we got when we, okay, so this token, yeah, we got when we use the Google OAuth. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to copy that, paste it over here, and pray for the best. So let's see, send, and we get secret resource. Great. Now let's use the JWT token that we received once we signed up. So this is when we created a new account. So I'm going to replace it over here, and let's see what happens next. Okay, great, it's working. Now this is a JWT token that we received once we actually logged in with already existing local authentication account. So I'm going to test that one as well. Okay, send. it's working. And the fourth case is we want to use Google OAuth, but we already have account this time. So right now I'm just going to click send again. Okay, because this time we didn't actually create a new account, but nonetheless we still got JWT token. And I'm going to paste it over here as well, and let's see, and it's working. And now I just want to show you that I'm going to change one character over here, and I click send, and it's not working. So it wasn't fake and it wasn't set up. Okay, so as you've been able to see, we totally did everything that we want to do in this video. We got all 4 cases working. I hope that this video shed some light on how you can mix local authentication with OAuth. And as you can see, it's not really that easy, but it also makes sense once you get a handle on how things work. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a lot. If you liked this video, please leave me a like, it helps a lot. If you really loved this video, feel free to subscribe and maybe share this video with your friends. In the next video we're going to tackle on the Facebook OAuth, and it should be similar, but it should also be fun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.